Wisp Sports Radio, the voice of women in sport.
This is episode 29 of the FAB Podcast on Wisp Sports Radio.
Excuse me.
The FAB Podcast is the weekly show brought to you by Females in Athletic Business for women in the sports business, where we believe that women in sport deserve extra coverage. Welcome to this week's episode. My name is Kristin Ray, and I'm the founder of Females in Athletic Business and one of your hosts of the FAB Podcast. I am excited to be joined today by Hannah Bradley, Assistant Director of Media Relations at the Southern Conference. She is here today for another installment of our Young Female Professionals series. Hannah has experience working in 3 different universities' athletic communications office and is now working on the conference level. Welcome, Hannah.
Thanks, Kristin. Thanks so much for having me this week.
Absolutely. It's our pleasure. So, Hannah, we usually like to start our episodes with our guest telling us a little bit about her journey into the sports industry. So, for instance, what kind of educational or internship or volunteer type experience you've had in the past. So just tell us kind of how you came to work in the sports industry, how you knew you wanted to work in the sports industry, and just a little bit about your journey.
Sure. Well, through high school, heading into college, I knew that I wanted to work in communications. So that was an easy decision for me. I majored in communications at Clemson, and during my freshman year, I really felt drawn to the sports side. I'd been an athlete my whole life, and growing up, I thought I used to want to be a broadcast journalist. And then, through my freshman year of classes, I realized that I liked being a little bit behind the scenes a little more. I didn't think I wanted to be on TV, so I tried to think of the best way to still stay around sports, kind of have the best of both worlds by being near sports, but I also knew how much I loved communications and writing. And so I kind of just tried to figure out what kind of experiences were out there, what the best way to do that was. In high school, I played softball, so Clemson doesn't have a softball team. They're actually starting one in a couple of years, but the best way for me to stay around sports was to be a batgirl for the baseball team. So I did that. I loved it. Got to know some of those coaches and got to know some of the director of ops, the SID, those type of things. And that's kind of how I figured out that SID was a thing. And that was the best of both worlds for me. I was able to work with student athletes. I wasn't a student athlete, but I was able to work with student athletes, tell their stories, use that communication side of things. But, it doesn't feel like work because you're talking about sports and you're watching sports. So I got super interested in that. So through that, I just contacted the sports information department, said I'm willing to do whatever. I'll volunteer. What kind of options do you guys have? What are ways that I can do to get better, figure out what this profession is? And big schools, any schools, I'm sure, really are more than willing to take help. So I volunteered for a summer.
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. I volunteered for a summer in their office, unpaid. I was clipping newspapers, doing menial tasks around the office, and I think it was pretty much it was things that needed to be done, but it was also a test to see if I was willing to stick it out. And after I worked for a semester, they had me on as a student worker for the next couple years. So that's kind of how I learned what SID was. And then, the more I did it, the more I loved it. And that naturally just transitioned into the opportunity to stay on as a graduate assistant. And I did that for 2.5 years and got my degree, which was great. But that was the natural kind of progression for me. And throughout that time, I was volunteering. I also did an internship with a minor league baseball team. Opportunities arose through my connections at Clemson to volunteer at the ACC football championship. So I did that. No one's going to turn down people who want to help, especially, if you are willing to work for free, which I think you should be. It's just a great experience. And, even if you don't get paid, you're growing your network, and things like that are really important. So that's kind of how I got started.
It's a story we've heard a couple times on the podcast from young women who have found success early on in their careers. The story of being willing to take on a lot at one time, take on a lot of work that is not paid. And so I think the more and more we can get that message out there to other young women that you've got to be willing to kind of do the grunt work and oftentimes not get paid for it. But it's really showing up to be what's making the difference between the young professionals that have wonderful jobs that they're passionate about and the ones who may be struggling to find it. So it's a great message, and I'm glad that we're hearing it again from you.
Yeah, absolutely. If you can put aside the fact that you don't make any money and just focus on the experiences that you gain and the network that you get into, and it's just a good learning experience. Like, you may not like it, you may love it, but just trying it. Just get out there and try it, volunteer, meet people. You almost have to do that.
Some young women forget about, and young men too, but we're obviously speaking mostly to women. I think some of us forget that volunteering for an experience that doesn't necessarily seem like the most ideal one, even if by the end of it you think to yourself, well, now I know that's not for me, just like you kind of figured out that being on camera wasn't for you, is just as valuable as figuring out what is for you. Scratching something off the list of possibilities is just as important sometimes as finally putting the star next to the thing that is absolutely perfect for you. Because you have to keep scratching the things off the list in order to find the perfect one.
For sure, and everything's important. So you're not too good to do anything. When I volunteered at the ACC football championship, I was literally making copies and running stats, but everybody has a role, and somebody has to do that job, so why not let it be you? And that's one of those thankless jobs, but if someone doesn't do it, people notice, and it's important to just be there and fill whatever role's needed. And it really doesn't go unnoticed, but it's important not to think you're too good, or I'm not going to get any experience doing that. You're making connections, you're showing your work ethic. There's other benefits to come out of it, no matter what the task is that they're asking you to do.
And it looks good on your resume, so you could get 3 or 4 things out of it.
Absolutely.
And at the very least, you'll at least get the resume builder. So it is really important to do. So for those of us who aren't as familiar with what a media relations professional does, talk about some of your daily duties for the Southern Conference and what your job consists of.
Sure. Well, no 2 days are ever the same in media relations. I'm sure anybody else would tell you the same. Still learning a lot as far as how the job is at the conference level, because I've only been there just a month now. So I'm going to answer a couple of these questions from what I know at the conference level so far, and then also more so from the school level. But, duties of an SID are keeping stats at games, which is awesome. Just sitting on press row, using Stat Crew, compiling stats, and then, generating season stats. You write the recap or the preview, put that on the website. You're maintaining, doing a lot with the website maintenance, updating the score, linking that story, putting those stats. You deal a lot with your conference and the National Player of the Week awards, those type of things, submitting all that, submitting your preseason and all conference ballot, your postseason ballot, things like that. You're really serving as the middleman between the student athletes and the coaches and the media. So any media requests should come through you. You help facilitate that. And often you're helping staff the events, especially at smaller schools. You're responsible for staffing the scorers table, things like that. Really, no 2 days are the same. So at the conference level, a lot. Also game notes. Everybody knows game notes. Anything that the broadcasters talk about during a game that's televised, or your radio people, they get all of their nuggets of information from you, ideally. So they'll do their research, but nobody's going to know the program or the student athletes as well as you do. So each week, or before each game, however often your school does it, a lot of schools will do notes packets and just kind of include a bunch of information that when the plays are slow or there's a lot of dead time, they can throw some facts in there, talk about where people or schools are ranked nationally, things like that. So at the conference, I do player of the week and notes for volleyball on Monday, and on Tuesdays I have women's soccer. So each season, sports season will be a little bit different for me depending on what teams are in action. But right now, the bulk of my responsibilities are focused on fall sports, and I'm doing, like I said, notes and player of the weeks. Every game file for my sports gets sent to me, and I input that into the conference and generate statistics on the back end of our website so that at the end of each night, people can see the updated rankings, see who's leading the conference in whatever categories they're interested in. And then we put on championships. I haven't, been a part of a championship yet on this side, but I have been at the school side. So that'll be something else that we'll have to do. I'm going tomorrow on a site visit for a championship. So tomorrow I'm going to, ask questions and just figure out what the host school has as far as, plugins. Do you have places for the broadcasters? Do you have a copier? What do you have that we're going to need? What do we need to bring? Just things like that, so that when time comes for the championship, we'll be a little bit more prepared. But still figuring things out a little bit at the conference level, but it's a lot of the same stuff, just on the opposite side of it. Instead of sending in the player of the week nominations, I'm compiling the ballots and putting out the release. So it's a little bit different, but I'm really enjoying it.
Well, good. So you've recently transitioned from working for a university to working for a conference. Who all, in terms of other departments or other folks in other roles, do you interact with as a part of your job, whether it be, if you want to talk more about when you're at the university versus the conference level, like who are your main coworkers, if you will?
Well, our conference is relatively small. We're a mid-major conference. We have 11 teams, so I'm dealing with the SIDs at the schools in our conference that I mainly just with the sports that I deal with. So right now, I'm dealing a lot with volleyball and women's soccer, and then talking with them all the time throughout the week with schedule changes. They're sending me their files, sending me their recaps, doing things like that. But because our office, because our conference is small, our office is small as well. We only have 11 full-time staff members, and we have 3 interns. So deal a lot with them, because we're so small, we're all helping each other out. I deal a little bit with the athletic directors and the faculty athletic reps, not as much as a couple other people in our office do. And I don't deal with the student athletes quite as much as I did when I was at the school level. I'll obviously see them at championships and stuff, but for the most part, I'm talking with our championships director, our media relations intern, and then our media relations department is just the associate commissioner for media relations, who's my boss, me, and then 1 intern. So we're kind of a small team. We're interacting a lot. So pretty much our little small media relations team, some people in my office, the commissioners in our office talk to me all the time, which is kind of cool. I don't feel like a bunch of larger conferences get that, or a lot of school people at schools might not get that one-on-one interaction with the man at the top, like their athletic director and such. So that's a nice benefit. But pretty much just dealing a lot with our media relations team, and then a lot with the SIDs for the respective sports that I work with.
Okay, so they're kind of at the school level, you had more interaction with coaches and student athletes, and now you're at the conference level, and it's more media and then your internal office.
Correct, yeah. I send press releases to the media. It's a different interaction with the media because I don't get as many interview requests and things like that from the media, but since we are, the face of the conference, I'm putting out a little bit more press releases and things that might pick up a little bit more traction because it's coming from the conference office. But still some decent interaction with the media, but not as many, hey, can I talk to so-and-so today and get so-and-so on the phone, and not as much of that anymore.
Okay. No, that makes sense since you're not technically representing the student athletes or the coaches anymore. So that makes sense. So what are the biggest perks of your job?
Oh, man, there's a lot of perks in my job. When I was at the school level, and it still works in the conference level, I love telling the stories of the student athletes. It's just really cool to celebrate their successes and just see those big wins, especially at a mid-major conference and coming from a mid-major school where, I got to be the SID when Wofford beat North Carolina at North Carolina last year in men's basketball. And it's just like you feel connected to the program you're with, or, now I feel connected to all the 10 schools in our conference. But it's just really cool. There's a lot of perks, honestly. It doesn't feel like work. I'm working with people that I love. I'm growing my network. I have so many friends that I've met through my professional organization, and it's a big perk to be able to reach out to all these people that I know that I've met from Twitter chats or our COSADA conference, or just word of mouth. Everybody wants to help each other, and that's a huge perk. Now that I'm in the conference side, I'm enjoying the perk of a little bit more free nights and weekends than I did at the school level, which has been a nice perk. I still need to be around my computer to update things, but I'm not quite, running events until midnight and things like that. So that's been a little bit of a perk lately.
Well, I think it's worth mentioning that if you're on the team side, if you're working for an athletic department, covering one of the sports or several of the sports for the university, that it can be an all hours of the day kind of thing, especially if you're working for football program, basketball program, one of the, the higher profile programs, because news can break with them at any moment. People can be looking for comments from them at any moment, and you've got to be there to kind of handle that, right?
Oh, absolutely. When we beat North Carolina, we weren't supposed to do that. It was a Wednesday night, 5 days before Christmas, 9:00 tip, playing the defending national champions at home. They were ranked number 5. Nobody was expecting for us to win that game. The game gets over at 11. We've won. Suddenly, things are crazy. I'm on the phone with national media, arranging interviews with coach until 1 or 2 in the morning. We're just walking on the Dean Dome floor. And then I still had to go home and write my recap, look up records of, the last time this has happened, the person who's now my boss was emailing me from the conference level, talk with nuggets of information. And then, I'm just trying to facilitate all this, and it's 4:35 before I went to bed. So don't have to deal with that quite as much, but it is a little easier to turn things off now, but I don't have to get off the bus at 4:15 on a road trip, anymore on a Wednesday and things like that. So you're right. It is hard to turn off, and those people, besides your job, those people become your family because you spend so much time together, and it is hard to detach emotionally as well.
Mm-hmm. I've been there. So how has your relatively young age either helped or even maybe hindered you at times in your work in the industry so far, especially given that so much of your work has been either at a director or an assistant director level, which can be hard sometimes when someone so young is put in such a position of authority. Sometimes it's hard for the person yourself, and sometimes it's hard for the people that you may have to manage.
It is. I don't think it's been a hindrance. I think because of my age, I'm used to learning quickly. I can adapt quickly. I have that drive where I want to prove myself, so I'm going to do something until I get it right. I'm thrown into a lot of different situations and just can kind of manage. I'm so eager to learn that I really don't let my age, hinder anything. I think that my time management skills, straight out of college, when I got my first job, just starting, like you said, trying to figure out being a GA, doing all this volunteering, trying to figure out what I wanted to do while also being a student. I think that helps me because I just kept flowing into, the only way I know to live life is just busy. So I'm used to that. I think the organization skills, help being a little bit younger. I don't think it's been a hindrance. I think, every school I've worked at's had a small department, except for Clemson where I was a GA and I didn't have, a ton of power, but every department's been small. So even though I am the assistant, but we only have two people, or we only have 3 people. So the title isn't quite reflective of what the workspace is. But because of that, I've had to take on a lot of responsibility. But also because we're a small department, I know that boss's door is always open, and I can go to them and they're going to work to help me because, helping me in turn helps them, and we're helping each other. And and I'm getting a lot of experience. They're getting help, and I really don't think age has had any negative repercussions. I definitely try not to let it. There's really no telling me that I can't do anything, because I'm not going to listen to you. So,
Well, good. I like that you mentioned that your age, your youthful age is correlated with your eagerness, your ability to learn quickly, adapt quickly. I think those are all things that we have at that young age. And so you just seem to be completely taking advantage of that part of your personality and part of your lifestyle right now, in order to capitalize on these opportunities. And I think that's a really good thing to point out, and something that sometimes comes natural to people, but sometimes doesn't. So keeping that on the top of young people's mind is really important too. But one other question I had before we let you go is you finished your master's program in 2015, I believe, if I did my research right. Can you shine some light on what you've learned in terms of the value of a master's degree in this industry versus straight up going into the workforce after getting a bachelor's degree? Because I know there are a lot of young women who still question, and not just young women, some of us are still contemplating whether that master's degree is for us or not. Tell us a little bit about your personal experience of whether you think that master's, I don't want to say was your master's degree worth it, because that's a weird question to ask, but are you grateful that you spent the extra time and possibly the extra money, depending on whether you were a GA or not? And then would you recommend doing it for other young women, or do you think there's some relevance to just going straight into getting experience?
I definitely think there's pros and cons to both, and I think it depends on, your situation and the opportunities that you've been presented. If you've been presented a great job right out of school that you think helps you get to where you want to be, I don't think that you should turn that down to go to grad school. But, and I definitely don't think you have to have a master's to get jobs. I don't, but for me, it was a no-brainer. Wasn't quite ready to leave Clemson. I had a serious boyfriend. We got engaged while I was in grad school, and now we're married. So for me, it was a no-brainer to stay. I was going to be able to get more experience, just valuable work experience and instruction from some of the best in the profession. Tim Ray was the head SID at Clemson at the time, and he's a COSADA Hall of Famer. He is like the best in the profession, and for a chance to learn from him for 2 more years, stay in a college town, grow that personal relationship that I was in, and figure out what exactly I wanted to do for myself. I knew I wanted to be in the profession, but I kind of needed that to show me that I could do it, and just to make me feel more confident going forward when I was ready to apply for full-time jobs. I think anytime you can get a degree as a GA for free, that's a great opportunity. Nobody can ever take your education away from you. Nobody can ever, you earned that degree, you got that degree. It's also a huge benefit if the program that you want to study in, is something you can use. So sports administration programs, athletic leadership programs, anything like that where, it's something that you're going to be able to apply when you do get that next job. I don't see why you wouldn't want to get that extra experience and just some life lessons from that program, because I'm sure things like that, you would use forever. But if you can get a degree for free and the work experience, it sometimes makes for a crazy 2 years. But I personally think it's worth it. Like I said, I don't think it's necessarily necessary, but I think it's definitely something people should consider if they have the opportunity.
Well, I think you're correct. I mean, I work with a couple of GAs every day, and they struggle sometimes to make ends meet in terms of money, because their school's paid for, but that's kind of, at least in our program, there's not a lot in terms of monetary value that's offered to them other than the school portion of it, and so they do struggle a little bit for those 2 years. But in the end, what they get in terms of experience, references, networking ends up being priceless for them. So I think it just depends which like you said, is the program that they're being offered relevant to what they want to do in the future? and what's the cost benefit analysis, sometimes the legit like real cost money wise benefit analysis. So it's something I think all of us should consider at some point, and then just do a lot of research in terms of your side of the industry, right? I mean, are the people that are already in the position you're looking for, do most of them have that degree? What's your competition doing? So I think there's a lot to be considered about. There's no right answer. And like you said, you know, your situation seems like it was the exact right decision for you. And you know, it's different for everybody. So it's hard. It's a hard question to answer for everyone that I ask it.
It definitely is. There's no right answer. You know, the best advice I could give is just to look at who has a job that you want, you know, see what they did, ask people, you know, people that are listening today. This is just my opinion. Pick the brains of other people in the profession. Ask them if they think it's worth it. Ask them if they had the chance to do it and didn't, you know, did they regret it? Just sit down and write out a pros and cons list. And like you said, you might have to have some buy-in from your parents or people to help you financially, but just sit down with that pros cons list, talk to people, ask them if their program was worth it, talk to the professors in the program that you're thinking about, and just get their idea of what your workload will be. It really is different for each person, each school, you know, each time in their life. So there is no right or wrong answer, but I don't think it's something you should automatically write off. I think if you have the opportunity, you owe it to yourself to at least sit down and make that pros cons list.
Well, that's great advice. Hannah, I want to thank you so much, first of all, for taking the time to be here, because I know starting a new job can be very stressful, and you were willing, even when I asked you when you were on the very brink of this switch in your life, which can be so huge, you are willing to give us your time. So thank you so much for that. And thank you so much for being so open with your journey and with your experience. And if someone wanted to get in touch with you about maybe they're considering media relations and had just a few more questions, would you be willing to do that? And how might they be able to contact you?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I want to tell you, thank you for thinking to invite me on. This was a huge honor, and I'm completely flattered. You're the sweetest thing ever, and I love listening to the podcast.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you.
I love to be a help to anybody that needs it. You know, I wouldn't be where I am today if I didn't have people who offered me help. So I'd love to connect with anyone who wants to chat. My email is hbradley, BRADLEY, @socon.org. And you can find me on Twitter at Hannah Bradley CU. I also participate when I remember and have time in a couple Twitter chats on Monday nights at 9, there's the SIDA chat, #SIDA chat. And then Tuesdays, there's a YP sports chat, a young professionals in sports chat. So I try to participate in those when I can. I encourage people to check those out on Monday and Tuesday nights, young professionals in sports. And then the Monday one is more geared towards people and sports information. But even if you don't participate, follow along with the hashtag, and you can really learn a lot from the others in the profession, steal ideas from each other, make connections, and you can just watch from afar if you don't want to participate. But those are good ways to reach me. Anybody, you know, I'm more than willing to help with any kind of questions, whether it's, you know, GA versus job or conference versus school level. Anything I can do to help, I'm more than willing.
Oh, well, thank you again, Hannah, so much for being here and for all that wisdom. And let us know how things go with the new job, and we'll always be keeping track of you since you're such a young up and comer in the industry. So thanks again for being here.
Well, thank you, Kristin. Thank you for your kind words, and thanks for having me.
Conversations from the world of women's sports. This is Wisp Sports Radio.
Wisp Sports Radio can be found on any podcast app. Follow Wisp Sports on social media at Wisp Sports. Please give us a 5-star review on iTunes to help promote coverage of women in sport. Thanks for listening and supporting women in sport everywhere. To follow Females in Athletic Business or this podcast, use @FAB Sports.org on social media. The FAB Podcast is a co-production of Females in Athletic Business and Wisp Sports. Check out Females in Athletic Business at www.fabsportsorg.com. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll be back next week.